Sister Madaleva, when I was 8 years old, called me when we were passing through South Bend. She called me. First she said my name was beautiful, and then she said that I was a consequence. And this is also about the power of prayer, especially about the power of nuns praying. My mother graduated from St. Mary's College in 1944, the war years, of course. And what you need to know is a couple of things. St. Mary's was 2.5 miles up the road from South Bend, Indiana. It had a grand avenue of elm trees that led to the two-way highway. And across that highway was a road that was the back road to the University of Notre Dame. Now, Notre Dame went through a transformation. Once the war started, it was still a men's college, and once the war started, Notre Dame didn't have any students. So it could have closed. And the school officials didn't think Notre Dame would last, but to the rescue came the United States Navy that wanted to use the campus to train men who enlisted and would be trained to be officers, and of course, the Navy would pay for all this. So Notre Dame's prayers were answered, and they opened up the campus and several buildings to the United States Navy. So if you ever watch a game between Navy and Notre Dame, you might notice that Notre Dame will cross the field and sing the alma mater for Navy, and Navy will cross the yard and sing the alma mater for Notre Dame. It's a long-standing tradition, and that's where it comes from. Now, in late 1943, my mother, Peggy, and a couple of her friends took the bus to South Bend, and they went to Oliver's Bar. And I would always kid her saying, "Oh, you and Dad met in a bar," and she would say, "Cocktail lounge." Well, I would say, hey, my parents would met in a bar, but it really was a cocktail lounge. I've seen the pictures, and it was gorgeous. Oliver's hotel, and the cocktail lounge, so to speak, was beautiful with shining wood and linen-covered tablecloths, and it was very elegant, 1890s decor. In fact, Oliver's Hotel was when the cast and crew of Knute Rockne, All-American, Win One for the Gipper, Ronald Reagan, when they filmed on location at Notre Dame, they stayed at Oliver's. Anyway, that is Oliver's. It was pretty fancy. So Peggy and her friends, being of age now, they were seniors, they went into the cocktail lounge. They sat at a table, they looked around, hoping some nice Navy midshipmen would be around and stop at their table. There was a couple, actually 3 people. There was a guy named Pat Sheeran, and he was with his date, Sally. His friend Fred came along, both of the midshipmen, and Fred's date didn't show up. So Sally said, "I'll find someone for Fred." So she got up and she looked around and she picked Peggy. And Peggy thought she was going over to be with Pat, but she was going over to be with Fred. I'm sure you can guess that that didn't last long. But they danced. They had a nice conversation, and the girls had to go. There was a curfew at St. Mary's, of course, so they had to catch a bus to get back to the college. And as Pat was helping Peggy on with her coat, he said, "I'll call you." Well, he didn't. And she waited a week. She went back to Oliver's with her friends, and she saw him, and he stopped at the table, and he talked with her a long time, and he said, I'll call you. Now, in his defense, the training that he was going through was pretty rigorous. It ended at midnight, and it was basically learning how to be an officer in a ship in the South Pacific during wartime, and that had a lot of classes and a lot of studying, and they had to pass with like a B+ or higher in their exams. So she waited a week. So it just didn't happen. So Mom was a German major, And you might guess that there weren't many German majors during the war in South Bend, or at least at St. Mary's. And so she was the only senior in her German class. So she and Sister Magdalena, instead of sitting in a classroom, they would walk around the dorm at Le Mans Hall, which was a very elegant building, by the way, or go outside, weather permitting, and they would speak in German, the literature Mom was supposed to have read, but also about other stuff. And somewhere in the conversation, Mom she wasn't my mother then, but Peggy expressed her frustration that this Pat just wasn't calling, and she realized he was busy, but he just wasn't calling. And so Sister Magdalena, sorry about the names, Sister Magdalena happened to talk to her chum, Sister Madaleva, and Sister Madaleva said, well, let's put this on the petitions for Eno. So the St. Mary's was also the home of the Sisters of the Holy Cross. And every evening, the sisters who were teaching or the sisters who were just learning to be nuns or retiring, they all gathered for a novena to the Blessed Mother. And at the end, they would state their petitions, the war, people's health, and so forth. Well, at the end of, for a couple of weeks, the end of the last petition was that Pat Sheeran would ask Peggy Vlasek out on a date. He didn't have a chance. And 2 weeks later, I think it was November, my mom was on the 4th floor of Le Mans Hall, and you could see over the side to the where the door was, where everybody went. Everyone went to the side door, not the front. So someone yelled, "There's a midshipman coming up the walk." This on Sunday was a pretty rare thing. So Peggy looked out the window and saw it was him, and she thought, could he be coming for me? Sally doesn't go to St. Mary's. So she clattered down the 4 flights of stairs. You couldn't take the elevator in the war. And she just clattered down the elegant first-floor hallway of St. Mary's that led to the side door, but she stopped behind one of the pillars and hid, not sure that he was looking for her. And just behind her, the door of the president's office opened. Sister Madaleva came out. She saw Peggy hiding behind the pillar. She said she looked over at the desk and saw this midshipman having a problem because the sister at the desk said, and she hadn't heard Peggy's name, she said, "Oh, our girls are not allowed to go out at all. They must go to Mass here. There are no guests. I'm terribly sorry," and so forth. So Peggy was getting a little desperate, and I guess so was Pat. But Sister Madaleva sailed. She looked at my mother. She said, "Is he the one?" And Peggy, "Oh yeah." So Sister Madaleva sailed. Why am I getting choked up? She sailed into to the desk where Sister Dragon was sitting, and she said, "May I help you?" And he said, "Yes, I'd like to take Peggy Vlasek to Mass and to breakfast in South Bend, if that's all right, but I understand it's not." And she said, "What is your name?" And he said, "Pat Sheeran." And the other nun at the desk said, "Oh," and Sister Madaleva said, "It's all right, sister. Peggy can go, and I'll be responsible for the consequences." So that's why I'm a consequence. Because my fate would have ended right there if the rules had been honored. So Peggy was so captivated by Pat. They got along very well, and they could hardly see each other because both of them were busy, but he more so. At Christmas, she didn't go home Thanksgiving. At Christmas, she went home, came back 2 days later, and let him know, had to leave a message, that she was there and would meet him at the grotto. Now, the grotto was just a short walk up the back road to Notre Dame. You passed the cemetery, you passed the seminary, you passed the lake, and then there's the grotto, which is a reconstruction of the grotto at Lourdes, and there is a statue of Mary in a crevice in the rock. And so Mom went there, lit a candle, there are candles, and a kneeler, and was kneeling, and when Pat showed up and led her across the road to the little log chapel that was the first building built at Notre Dame, and he proposed, and she accepted. And I'm not sure they had more than 20 words between them that entire time. But she was quite happy. She went home. No, she didn't go. That was before. January 20th, Dad, with the rest of the midshipmen, graduated, became an ensign, and promised to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. And he and Peggy and his family went to Dayton to spend a few days, but then he got the call that he was to report to San Francisco and be waiting to go to war. So that was a very tearful exodus. But we won, and he, after being bombed by the Japanese and a few other exciting events, he returned he landed in San Francisco, and at the time, anyone returning from war, everything was free. The hotel room was free. He stayed at the Fairmont. He made all these long-distance phone calls, but the first he made was to Palmerton and to Peggy. Peggy was at the movies. So Aunt Betty, it was all in one street, Main Street, Palmerton. If you don't know, it's really small. So Aunt Betty, who took the call, ran down the street to the movie theater, ran into the theater, and she yelled, "Peggy, Pat's on the phone in San Francisco." Everybody knew what that meant. And they're clapping when my mom was running up the aisle. I wish I knew what the movie was. And running down to the street, getting the phone. And it was September 5th. That was Dad's birthday, in fact. And they planned to get married a few weeks later, September 18th. Everybody was up for it. And it was, well, that's how I'm a consequence. Let's see. I'm grateful to Madaleva and my parents, of course, and to St. Mary's. Sometimes doesn't get a lot of coverage because it's in the shadow of the University of Notre Dame, but it has its own reasons for prominence. Sister Madaleva does too. She opened the college to a lot of extraordinary people in the study of theology, as well as she was one of the first to open up a Catholic college for African American students. And that was another story. Anyway, I'm grateful to them for it. It has its own reasons for prominence, St. Mary's, and its stubbornness at remaining still a women's college, a women's liberal arts college.